They didn't even hesitate. No pause. Just a cold, rehearsed voice severing me from my life as easily as cutting a loose thread. We all agreed it's better if you don't come to Noah's wedding, my son Lucas said plainly, stripping away decades of love and presence without even the courtesy of an explanation or apology. Before we dive into this story of quiet betrayal and fierce reclamation, if you appreciate stories of strength born from pain, please like and subscribe. I was kneeling in my garden, clipping the thorny stems of my roses, when my phone buzzed quietly inside my cardigan pocket. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered without looking. Only one person still calls me. Grandma? Lucas's voice was calm but rehearsed, like a performance he'd practiced many times. I wanted to let you know Noah's wedding is this Saturday. We've all agreed, it's better if you don't come, he said, words falling flat but sharp like a blade. I said nothing. Not because I was shocked, my heart had been bracing for this moment for weeks. Instead, I let silence fill the space between us, hoping the weight of it would settle on him. It's not personal, he added, voice hurried. Julia thinks it might be too much for you, with your memory issues. Memory issues? I almost laughed bitterly. I'm 74, not a ghost. I pay my own bills, cook every meal, and have never once forgotten a birthday. But Julia, the perfect daughter-in-law with her icy smile and voice like glass, had been planting this poison for months. I didn't need to ask who we all meant. Noah. Julia. Even that cousin of hers, who calls herself a family therapist after some quick online course. Lucas's words felt hollow. I thought of Noah as a boy, hiding behind my legs during thunderstorms, whispering I made him feel safe, the time I took him to his first baseball game and he called it the best day of his life, when I co-signed his car loan at 16 because Lucas said he couldn't afford it that month. Now, at 27, Noah wanted a wedding without his grandmother. I looked up and saw two hawks circling high above the sycamore tree, silent, indifferent. Fine, I said, and hung up. I stood there a moment, phone still in hand, until the screen went dark. Then I went inside, took the wedding invitation off the fridge, and threw it into the trash. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened the freezer, pulled out a batch of lemon sugar cookie dough with white chocolate chips, wedding favors I'd made, and slid them into the oven like nothing had happened. The kitchen filled with the warm scent of citrus and vanilla, the same smell that had always filled the house during holidays, birthdays, and every time Noah came as a child. When the cookies were done, I packed them carefully in a Tupperware container, tied a ribbon around it, and walked down the block to Lucas's porch. I left the cookies by the door with a sticky note that read simply, for the celebration. I didn't knock. I didn't want to see their faces. I walked home in silence, unsure if I felt more like a ghost or a fool. That night, I set my phone to silent and stared at the blinking light that told me messages were piling up, messages I refused to open. The worst kind of betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet, deliberate, disguised in love's clothing. And at that moment, I vowed if they thought they could erase me from my own family story, I would never go quietly. The sun rose gently over the neighborhood, casting long golden rays through the trees and spilling soft light onto the porch where I sat nursing a cup of coffee. The world around me woke as usual, runners pounding the pavement, dogs tugging on leashes, the hum of early delivery trucks, but inside me, a stillness reigned that was almost unbearable. This familiar rhythm, once a comforting backdrop to my days, now felt like a cruel reminder of my exclusion. There is a silence far heavier than any shout. It is the silence of absence, when the very people who should notice you vanish your presence as if you were a ghost, leaving behind nothing but an empty space no one dares to acknowledge. I felt like I was peering through a thick pane of glass, watching my own life continue without me, unnoticed and unmissed. I thought back to every sacrifice made for Lucas, every lost moment, every stolen dream, the years of bending myself to fit his world so he could soar. I was 28 when his father died in a factory accident, an abrupt end that shattered the fragile life we'd been building. The loss left me a widow and single mother, forced to navigate grief and responsibility in the same breath. I never remarried, not because I lacked chances, but because I vowed that Lucas would never feel less than my everything, that no one would come between us. I worked double shifts at the diner, cleaned houses on weekends, chased down every extra dollar to keep him in a private school far from the cold reality I had escaped, eviction notices, nights with nothing but saltine crackers to eat, the gnawing uncertainty of a childhood without safety. I can still see the bright boy at 11, clutching a science award with a grin so wide it could have lit the darkest room. "I told everyone my mom is the smartest person I know," he said. I held on to those words through years when praise became silence and love was assumed, not spoken. Then came Julia. 10 years ago, she slipped quietly into our lives, polite, ever smiling, her sweetness laced with something sharper beneath. Her compliments felt like veiled critiques, her smiles like masks hiding silent judgment. At our first dinner, she said my meatloaf tasted so nostalgic, it should be in a museum. I laughed it off, naive to the war being waged in quiet words. Her subtle digs grew bolder. She suggested Lucas handle my medications, casually questioned if I had a lawyer, and, with thinly veiled concern, hinted I might need assisted living before a fall forced the issue. I dismissed these as caring words. Foolish me. The true weight of their plan revealed itself when pneumonia forced me into a sterile hospital room for 8 days. My goddaughter Sophia, my chosen daughter, was the light during those dark times. She saw through the kindnesses to the truth beneath, a looming future where control could slip from my hands, where my voice might be silenced. Sophia insisted on protection. She helped me draft a living trust, insisting on a kill switch clause hidden within the legalese. This clause would allow me to revoke everything, without permission, if trust shattered into betrayal. At first, I thought her warnings dramatic, exaggerated by fear. Now, that clause is the only reason I still hold power in a family that sought to erase me. The trust holds over $1.3 million, decades of frugality, the sale of a rental property, and a life insurance payout from my late husband. Lucas and Julia know about the trust. I am certain they quietly planned their futures on my hard-earned savings, Noah's house down payment, Lucas's retirement. But they forgot the most vital truth. When you treat someone as nothing, you must pray they forget they still hold the power to change everything. The realization hit slowly at first, a creeping frost chilling the edges of every interaction, every smile, every whispered word. Julia was no mere daughter-in-law, she was a masterful architect of quiet destruction, planting seeds of doubt in Lucas's mind and weaving a narrative to rewrite my very existence. Her smiles were never warm. They were calculated, a veneer covering a ruthless intent. Conversations with her left me unsteady, second-guessing myself, questioning my place in the family I'd built with my own hands. She began to undermine me with subtlety that was almost cruel in its precision. Comments about my memory issues slipped into casual conversations like poison in the wine. Maybe it's stress, she'd say, or sometimes aging catches up faster than we expect. She twisted words, replayed incidents with a bias that made me appear fragile, forgetful, even unstable. Lucas, torn between the daughter he loved and the mother he was raised by, stood at a crossroad of loyalty and confusion. I watched the shift in his eyes, the way he hesitated before speaking to me, the cautious distance growing where there was once unshakable closeness. It was heartbreaking to see a son wrestle with doubt planted by another's deception. I tried to hold on to what little normalcy remained. But the cracks widened. 3 years ago, when pneumonia laid me low in a hospital bed, Julia's true colors emerged. She spoke in tones that belittled my strength, sowing fears in Lucas about my ability to care for myself. Sophia was my lifeline then, fiercely protective, sharply aware of the threats not just to my health, but to my autonomy. Together, we crafted the living trust, a fortress of legal protections to safeguard what was mine. Yet Julia's machinations did not cease. Behind closed doors, she manipulated texts, edited voicemails, fabricated messages that painted me as a villain, a confused woman obsessed with drama. She rewrote my story, turning me from matriarch to martyr, from caregiver to antagonist. Lucas, caught in the storm, struggled to discern truth from deceit. Noah, my grandson, was the collateral damage, a young man caught between loyalties, fed half-truths, left uncertain whom to believe. Julia's cousin, the self-styled family counselor, reinforced the narrative, poisoning the well with every word, branding me toxic. The isolation was suffocating. I was no longer welcome in milestones, family dinners, or celebrations. Even the wedding I had helped plan, paid for, and dreamed of attending was held without me. My presence was erased with surgical precision. Photos cropped, memories edited, invitations withheld. The note I found on Facebook, a black and white engagement photo captioned with words of unconditional love and support, was a cruel irony. Comments praising the exclusion of toxic energy stung like salt on an open wound. I sat alone, scrolling through the evidence of my erasure, clutching a card Noah had given me years ago. "Grandma, you are the reason I believe in family." Those words were my armor as I prepared to fight back, not with anger, but with the cold clarity of truth. Days blurred into nights as I buried myself in the endless tide of messages I refused to read. The weight of erasure settled like a stone in my chest, but beneath it burned a quiet resolve. I was no longer the woman who silently endured, I was the woman who would reclaim her story. Sophia, ever my fierce ally, became my strategist and confidant. She reminded me that love could become leverage, and when it does, protection is not just prudent, it's necessary. With her guidance, I summoned the courage to call our attorney, Shannon, a woman whose stern voice and sharp eyes matched the gravity of the task ahead. In the quiet of the law office, surrounded by cold walls and legal jargon, I reviewed every document with painstaking care. The trust that had once named Lucas and Julia as primary beneficiaries was about to be rewritten. No longer would their names adorn the pages that held the fruits of my lifetime's labor. Instead, Sophia and Noah would inherit not just assets, but a legacy of truth and resilience. The kill switch clause was my final weapon. If Noah did not come to see me face to face within 30 days, he would receive nothing. It was a safeguard not of punishment, but of honesty. Signing those papers was not an act of vengeance, it was an affirmation of my existence, a declaration that I mattered, that I would no longer be sidelined. That evening, the first ripple hit the family pond. Lucas's phone lit up with calls he couldn't answer, texts he ignored, desperation bleeding through every message. But I remained silent. The betrayal had been quiet, my response would be deliberate. The knock came at my door the next day. Lucas stood there, smaller somehow, stripped of the arrogance that once shielded him. His eyes, bloodshot and desperate, searched mine for answers I was no longer afraid to give. He pleaded for understanding, but the truth was a wound that had long festered. Julia waited in her car, a silent shadow unwilling to face the consequences of her own machinations. Inside, we sat across from each other, mother and son, the chasm between us measured in years of lies and broken trust. I told him everything, the trust reallocation, the fabricated stories, the poison Julia had spread. He listened, eyes wide with disbelief and regret. The fragile thread of our bond quivered but did not yet break. The choice lay before him, to continue down the path of deception, or to seek reconciliation with the woman he once knew. The air in my living room was thick with an unspoken tension, the kind that settles when the walls bear witness to a confrontation long overdue. Across from me, Lucas sat rigid, the pale light from the window casting sharp shadows on his drawn features. His hands trembled as they gripped the folder I had placed deliberately between us, a folder that held not just papers but the fragile remnants of a family unraveling. I watched him as he opened the folder slowly, eyes scanning the printouts, screenshots of messages I never sent, conversations manipulated by Julia's clever hands, voicemails sliced and stitched to craft a narrative that made me the villain. Each forged text was a calculated stab, a subtle war waged against my very existence. His pale lips parted, voice barely a whisper. "Mom." I didn't realize how far she'd gone. The words hung heavy between us, a fragile acknowledgement of betrayal's depth. He sifted through the incriminating evidence, Julia's messages designed to isolate me, fuel the distance between Noah and me, poison the love I had fought to nurture. A voicemail transcript caught his eye, Julia's voice laced with venom, accusing me of poisoning the family with victimhood and manipulation. It was a damning confession that no one had dared to speak aloud until now. Lucas swallowed hard, his throat tight. "I'm so sorry," he said, though his apology felt fragile against the weight of years lost. I met his gaze steadily, unwavering. "You chose to believe her, because it was easier than facing the truth." His eyes filled with tears, tears of regret, of loss, of the painful realization that the foundation he had trusted was built on deceit. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a flash drive, my final proof. I handed it to him without a word. On it were unedited recordings, my voice, raw and real, intertwined with Julia's ramblings that exposed the lies she had woven into our lives. "This is the truth, Lucas. No one needs to hear it, not through lies or half-truths, but straight from the source." Lucas's hands trembled as he held the flash drive, his fingers tightening around it as if it were a lifeline. For a long moment, we sat in silence. The room was heavy with the weight of fractured trust and the tentative hope of healing. Days drifted by in a haze of quiet anticipation. Noah did not reach out immediately. His absence was a gnawing ache, a silence that screamed of pain and confusion. I told myself not to hold my breath, to brace for distance. But on the fourth day, there was a knock at the door. My heart stopped as I opened it to see Noah standing there, unsure, tentative, a boy caught between worlds. His eyes searched mine, haunted by questions, by hurt, by longing. He held a folded letter, the edges worn, a testament to its constant presence in his pocket. "I listened," he said softly, voice breaking under the weight of what he had learned. "I heard everything." Slowly, he unfolded the letter, revealing a photograph, the two of us covered in flour, laughing in my kitchen years ago, a frozen moment of joy and love. "That photo," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "has been with me through everything. When I was scared or unsure, I'd look at it. It reminded me of who you are." His words unlocked a flood of memories and tears. He admitted the lies had poisoned his mind, warped his understanding of love and family. But his footsteps to my door spoke of a desire to reclaim the truth, to rebuild the bond Julia had tried to sever. We sat together in silence, hands entwined, the fragile threads of our relationship beginning to knit anew. The wounds were fresh, the path uncertain. But in that quiet afternoon light, hope stirred. The day Julia came face to face with the consequences of her web of lies was colder than any I could remember. I was in the frozen food aisle of the grocery store, staring vacantly at the rows of chicken pot pies and lasagna, my mind swirling with a tempest of exhaustion, pain, and resolve. Then, her voice cut through the air, low, sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. "Nice to see you out and about, Eleanor," she said, arms folded, lips curled into that perfectly practiced half-smile. The smile of a woman who thinks she's won before the battle even begins. I turned slowly, locking eyes with the woman who had orchestrated so much of my isolation. Without flinching, I met her cold gaze. "You think this proves something?" she sneered, stepping closer, lowering her voice. "That stunt with the trust? Real mature." I placed the pot pie carefully into my basket and replied quietly, "I think it proves you underestimated the wrong woman." Her laughter was brittle, forced. "You've spent your life clinging to Lucas and Noah like they owe you something. Like because you paid for a few things, you get to control everyone." I inhaled deeply, steadying the tightness in my chest that threatened to break free as anger. "I gave more than money," I said evenly. "I gave my years. My time. My love. You rewrote history and expected me to thank you." Her jaw tightened, lips pressed thin. "I didn't rewrite history," she hissed. "I just cleaned up the narrative. You were always the martyr, the poor widow who needed a pedestal. Lucas needed space. Noah needed boundaries. You made everything about you." I studied her face, searching for cracks beneath the mask. "You told him I had memory issues. You poisoned him against me." She scoffed. "You did that yourself." I shook my head slowly. "No. That was all you. You forgot one thing: manipulation always leaves fingerprints." And eventually, the light finds them. She looked like she wanted to spit at me but settled for a smirk. Enjoy your little victory. It won't last. Lucas is still my husband, Noah is still my stepson, and you're still alone. I smiled softly, unshaken. Maybe so. But I'm alone with my name intact. Without another word, I walked away, leaving her standing in the aisle, a fading shadow of the woman who had tried to erase me. That night, my phone buzzed, a single message from Noah. I have the recording. She admitted everything. My fingers trembled as I reread his words. He had heard Julia's voice unravel, her venom spilling out in a way she hadn't intended. He followed up, she said you always turn people against her. I recorded the whole thing. I hesitated, then replied, send it to your dad first. He needs to hear it from her mouth, not mine. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas had the truth now, unfiltered, undeniable. But he hadn't yet spoken. I watched a moth flutter helplessly against my window, foolishly drawn to a light it could never reach. In that moment, I understood Lucas's silence, the weight of a truth that threatens to burn down the foundations of everything he believed. Julia's carefully crafted facade was crumbling. And the family she had tried to control was beginning to see through the cracks. The day of the meeting arrived with an uneasy stillness hanging over the house. I spent the morning preparing the living room with deliberate care, chairs arranged in a circle like a courtroom, folders laid out neatly on the coffee table, each one bulging with evidence, trust amendments, screenshots, transcripts, every fragment of deception laid bare. I was calm, resolute. This was no longer about revenge. It was about accountability, about reclaiming my story. One by one, they arrived. Lucas first, his shoulders stiff, eyes tired, a man bearing the weight of choices he wished he could undo. Noah followed, expression guarded but resolute, as if steeling himself for what was to come. Julia entered last, eyes fixed on the floor, lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. Sophia sat quietly beside me, calm and watchful, a sentinel guarding the truth. My late husband's sister, Darla, came with a notebook and pen, ready to document every word, every detail, as if this gathering was a deposition for years of silence. When everyone had settled, I began. This isn't about punishment, I said, voice steady. It's about truth. About what's real. I handed each person a folder, watching as they opened the files inside. Inside lay the reality, months of calls I never received, messages I never sent, conversations twisted to exclude me. Julia rolled her eyes and scoffed, dismissing the whole affair. This is absurd, she said. You're treating this like a courtroom. I met her gaze without flinching. Because this is exactly what you've been running from, proof, facts, the truth. Lucas opened his folder, silent at first, then his eyes traced the pages, absorbing the full scope. Noah sat beside him, having read much already, but now seeing the entirety of the deceit laid bare. Sophia cleared her throat, her voice calm but firm. Every financial transaction is documented. Every amendment is legal. The clause requiring Noah to visit Eleanor remains in place, and it has been fulfilled. Julia turned to Lucas, her voice rising in desperation. Are you seriously going to let them do this to me? Lucas didn't look at her. You lied, he said quietly. To me, to Noah, to everyone. And I let you. Her laughter cracked like shattered glass. Oh, please. She's played the martyr for decades. Darla leaned forward, voice cold with years of observed patterns. This isn't new, Julia. You've just grown sloppier. Julia's face flushed crimson. Of course you side with her. You never liked me. No, Darla said sharply. I just see the truth. Lucas finally met my eyes. I don't know how to fix this. You don't, I replied. But you start by not protecting lies anymore. Noah's voice broke the silence. I'm still marrying her, he said, but not blindly, and not at the cost of the people who stood for the truth. He took my hand, steady and sure. In that small gesture, I felt seen, truly seen, more than I had in months. Julia laughed again, a bitter sound. This is insane. You're all buying into paranoia and guilt. I met her eyes calmly. No. We're rejecting silence and fear. Lucas stood, voice low but firm. I think you should leave, Julia. She stared at him as if stunned. You're kicking me out? I'm asking you to leave, he said. So we can speak honestly, without manipulation. She grabbed her purse, muttering under her breath, and stormed out, slamming the door like a final punctuation mark. The room fell into a heavy silence. Lucas looked around, eyes wide, taking in the damage, the rot beneath the surface. I should have stopped this sooner, he admitted. But I kept hoping it would get better, that it was just stress or miscommunication. I nodded. You chose comfort over clarity. It's what most do until it costs too much. Darla closed her notebook. What now? She asked. I reached for the final envelope on the table. This is my last revision, I said. It removes you permanently from the trust. I'm not doing this to punish you, I told Lucas. I'm doing this because trust isn't money. It's the belief someone will protect your name when you're not in the room. He opened it slowly, read, and nodded. I understand. Noah looked between us, hesitant. I handed him a single sheet, his reinstatement, signed and notarized. You earned it, I said. By showing up. By asking questions. By choosing truth. Lucas folded the envelope and placed it on the table. What happens now? He asked softly. You decide if you want to be her husband or my son, I said. He stood and walked toward the door. If I could undo it, I can't. But you can stop pretending it didn't happen. He nodded and left. I sat back, alone, not broken, not boiling, just finally clear-eyed enough to see who had steered the ship, and who had been applauding from the shore. The wedding day arrived, wrapped in the kind of solemnity that only comes when absence speaks louder than presence. I chose not to attend, not because I was unwelcome, but because I had already endured more than enough. What I needed was never a photograph in a family album or a polite smile across a crowded reception hall. I needed recognition, respect, and the quiet restoration of my place, earned, not begged. The house was empty of me, yet filled with the echoes of my past efforts, the bags I had paid for, the notes I had penned by hand, the memories of a family I had once woven together with love and care. Their absence was my presence, a ghost in the photographs carefully cropped to exclude me. The day after the ceremony, Noah came to visit. He was dressed in the same suit he had worn the day before, but the tie was gone, loosened like the walls he was beginning to tear down. He carried 2 slices of leftover wedding cake in a bakery box. We sat on the porch in the soft afternoon sun, eating in silence, letting the quiet between us speak volumes. Finally, he broke the silence. It wasn't the same without you. I nodded, not needing words. He told me about Julia's response to the confrontation, how she had reacted badly to the legal action his father had taken, filing for separation and drawing boundaries Julia had never anticipated. And you? I asked quietly. He shrugged, uncertain. I love her, he said honestly, but I'm seeing things I couldn't before. It's hard to look at someone the same after hearing them lie in your grandmother's voice. I held that moment gently, careful not to rush him. That's what love looks like, I said softly. Showing up before the door closes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the worn photo, the one of us covered in flour after a baking mishap, laughing in my old kitchen. I had it in my wallet at the altar, he confessed. Not for luck. For truth. My throat tightened, but I held back the tears. Instead, I smiled. Keep it close, I said. And don't let anyone convince you that protecting someone means hiding from the truth. He nodded slowly. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows on the porch, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into my favorite chair by the window. The world outside softened as evening settled in, no noise, no pretense, just peace. Peace I had earned by finally stopping to ask others to see my worth. Because I was no longer living to be seen. I was living to be free. The invitation to the wedding, once hidden away in a drawer, was carefully placed in a photo album beside the legal documents that had changed everything. I was not erasing history. I was recording it properly, on my terms, with my truth. Julia's departure had left a void, but in that space grew a new clarity. Lucas began to rebuild trust slowly, stumbling through apologies and promises. Noah found his way back to me, not the polished version shaped by others, but the grandson I had raised with love, laughter, and flower-dusted kitchen memories. Sophia remained my steadfast guardian, the daughter I chose and the family I built anew. And me? I was finally at peace. Not because the past was perfect, but because I had claimed my story, fully, fiercely, and without apology. Thank you for joining this deeply personal journey of resilience and truth. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to stay connected with more inspiring stories like this. Remember to take care of your health and cherish those you love every day. For more heartfelt stories, visit our page and let the power of real life inspire you.